Hi, Jace here in session, and I'm working on a track for piano and whatever other instruments I decide to throw into the fray. And I'm talking a lot about tempo, the importance of tempo, the power to edit the tempo, and what that entails, what kind of knowledge you need to have to do that. And this really points towards the subject of tempo mapping and beat mapping. I'm going to recap some of the things we talked about in part one of this, and I'm going to continue on down the stream here with some more beat mapping. Why don't we just start by me getting onto the screen here, and let's take a look at this track right now. I'm going to disengage the tempo as it is, and we're just going to listen to what's going on. See, that's me using a placeholder there that is identifying to my ears that I'm hearing strings there. So, as a little klutzy as that sounds coming in, and maybe not being intonated with passion or the same strength that the piano is doing, it's a marker, you see. And as you'll see, this tempo line is static. That means that this tempo is frozen in time. The reason the tempo is moving around is because that's the way I played the track. And this comes to the subject of the importance of tempo. Okay, so there are certain styles of music for which the power of the music totally benefits from having a tempo that is stuck right at whatever setting it is. And I mean, the music's actually obeying that setting. Let's say it's, most default tempos for DAWs are 120 beats per minute. Let's say it's 120 beats per minute. So that is the way the song goes. And electronic music is a perfect example of this. It creates the hypnotism. It creates the getting lost in the beat. It creates this sense of, disconnection from waiting for things to happen. It's almost like this rhythm, which is embedded into the track, kind of takes over your spirit in a way, or in some way. On the opposite end of that, there are some tracks for which if you try to turn on a click track and play to the metronome, you might get a nice take of the track, But whatever, expression that music could have made dies on the table because it is locked to this rhythm that is unyielding. I mean, let me go back to the beginning here. Let me give you a kind of a start with the screen here. I'm going to just play this for you myself for a second, and let's assume that I played this to a locked rhythm. Let's go here. Compared to even if I slow that down and I play that on a dogged rhythm, this would have been the result of what would have happened had I performed that track at that speed, at a dead stop speed. So, okay, so we understand blatantly that some music can only be truly expressed in its tempo freedom. But this brings us to a problem, okay? And that problem is when you record the track free tempo like that, you might want to add instrumentation to it later. This then presents the problem that the DAW system of timing, its tempo resource, is not locked to you. In the DAW's mind, the tempo's at 120 beats per minute, but you're playing freely here. It's somewhere between 81, 82, 83. Like that is the average tempo of this track. This puts us in a position of saying, well, if we really want to be able to control the entrances of other instruments and things, when you start adding string parts to an arrangement and such, this is what can happen, is you don't add the entrances right where they should be. So if a conductor was conducting this with a symphony orchestra, basically what would happen is this. The conductor would be standing in communication with the pianist right behind them, okay? So the conductor is going to be beating off time like this to the symphony. And then the conductor's going to turn around and look at the pianist and bring that symphony in. We need to have that conducting going on here to be able to create a tight production. Let us not forget that one of the most important facets of music production that people can hear right off the bat. Okay, we have four things. Okay, we got rhythm, melody, harmony, and tone color working together to make our music. The one that seems to be the most easiest to process for even the most non-musical ears is rhythm. Somebody can hear when something's out of time. Somebody can hear when something is slowing down. Somebody can hear when something's speeding up. And people can hear when things are not coming in all together where they're supposed to be. And this is what creates the perception of tightness in a production. So getting down to the beat mapping, yesterday, just to recap what we did, we went and created a bounce in place of the piano part of this production, and we took it up here into a scratch tempo track. And then, let me get on my screen, I'm sorry. We took the piano production and created a scratch tempo track, bounced that to audio, then went up into the beat map settings and created, we analyzed the transients, and the transients showed up here in blue. We did a little counting and we figured out where the beats are actually following, and we used Logic's beat marker capability to knock those into place. So let me go ahead and turn the metronome off. Now let me turn the metronome on and listen how they are now working together. Pay attention to what's going on here. See how that's moving around? Okay, so what does that give us the ability to do? Okay, well, obviously, when we talk about the editorial part of the process, like I've drawn my attention here to this point. Visually, I can see that there's something interesting going on here in the tempo. I'm not saying there's something wrong with that. I'm saying there's something interesting going on there. Let me just go ahead and play this from this point. Okay, there's a couple of different ways to look at that. Either that's some creative whatever, or I am rushing it a little bit. Let's say hypothetically that I let that go, which is exactly what I'm going to do. And then further on down the road, I write a bunch of orchestration here and everything else. What I do here is going to affect what happens down the road. And when I have everything locked to a tempo track, they all work together. If I kick this in some way, it doesn't jar out everything and desynchronize everything that is happening further down the line here in the traffic zone. So this gives me the ability to come in here and say, you know what? I really don't like what that's doing there, and I could pull that down theoretically and smooth that tempo out right there. I'm not making those kinds of decisions right now. I'm just putting myself in the position of being able to make all of these kinds of decisions. And this, by the way, is something that I do if I'm doing a solo piano track, and it's something I do if I'm doing a 300 track symphony orchestra crazy thing, you know? So here's a little bit more of what this looks like. I'm just going to work on this a little bit more, and I'm going to use beat markers to keep me going. I'm going to go ahead and create a new point. It's always important, man. You gotta create your create a methodology to your saving projects that really works for you. For me, I create versions, like this is working title on this is Hope, and this is version 15. And what I'll do is when I say revert here on my saves, that means I'm expecting an emergency might happen. This means, ooh, man, I'm getting into territory here where I could really mess stuff up. So I'll create that revert point, then I'll come in here, okay? And check this out. I'll create a version, and now I'm going to say what I'm doing. Tempo tracking. 1/3 done. Okay. That way, when I go into my save list and I look down through a batch of files, the files are actually telling me what's going on in the track. So if something bad happens, I can just look at my file structure and know exactly where I need to go to revert to a point where whatever bad happened is not happening. Let's keep going. All right. So I'm dealing in eighth notes are what is keeping my time in the left hand, and that's what's created this 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. One, two. See, there's a big slowdown right there. So this is where the tempo tracking is going to help me out a lot. I'm going to pull this down just a little bit because I know that I'm going slowing down, and it will align my my stuff a little better. going to be a big slowdown in there. See? Now we're speeding back up again. So I'm just going to drive this back up into the 80s. And I'm going to keep on keeping on here with this. Oops, I messed up there. Could have zoomed this out for a second. Turn off the click. All right, so essentially what we have is a return to tempo on this. You don't have to mark every one. You really don't. You want to get a fair amount of them. 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and let's turn our click on just to make sure we're not losing our minds. 3, 4, 1, 2 and 3 and 4 and there we go. And 2. So Logic now has tempo sensing smart tempo technology. You don't always have to do this. Sometimes you can right click on something and you can get inside of there and Logic will get it pretty much 98% accurately, and then you would wind up beat mapping on top of that. If it gives you a great interpretation of the tempo that you can actually use, but it is not entirely accurate, and unfortunately it will throw you off if you don't have accuracy if you're doing any kind of serious instrumentation. I'm not saying you have to do this to make music. There's no always or have to's in the music profession. You don't have to do something. Me, personally, I wanted to be able to have more craftable control over what... Oops, something's wrong there. Let's see what's going on there. 4 and... Okay. 1 and 2 and 3. Now we're moving back to odd tempo. You can see something like this is going to take you, roughly. And you might be in a position where you're not dealing with MIDI, you're dealing entirely with audio. And you would say, well, I don't have the luxury of using MIDI tracks to be able to do something like this with. And well, I'm using audio here. I had to render an audio file because what Logic is actually using, 1 and 2 and 3, Logic is using its transient information that's coming in here as the source. It's not listening for a beat, man. It's listening for a transient. It's not listening to your music and Logic saying 1, 2, 3, 4. Logic is saying transient, 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 transient. That's how Logic identifies. We're tricking Logic into keeping time and following us instead of us following Logic blindly into the night. Okay. And if you have any questions about this, I might not be able to get back to you right away, but go ahead and put a question in a comment field. And I'd be glad to... Let's check that. No, this needs to go here. And I'd be glad to offer any answers I can, even if it's just to talk about the importance of tempo. I can tell you that when I started doing this and making sure that this was a very early on part of the practice that I do less retakes. I do less second guessing. I unveils a level of confidence in what is happening inside of the music that causes a hell of a lot of relaxation when I'm making decisions. I'm not spending time burning time making decisions that could keep me running in circles. I know when you zoom out and you look at a tempo track and you see all this stuff that's going on here, and you're watching this I'm going to pull this down so you can see it. You're watching this tempo gauge change almost constantly. You think to yourself, it inspires you to want to think that, well, that can't be right. I mean, this tempo's all over the place. You got to remember, these tempo changes are just numbers. The interaction of the tempo is the human experience that's on the other side of this. When a person is listening to this, they're not thinking 82.1, 83.4, 82.5, 84.1, da-da-da-da-da. They're hearing da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, or da-da-da-da-da-da. They're not trying to process a bunch of numerical tempo data. Okay, we're getting a little more pronounced here. Let's see what's happening. 2, 3, 4, and oops. Okay. What's going to happen here is going to be something similar to what occurred back here. I had our old friend, the Fermata. So remember that there's a difference between this digital world and the human ears. If I want to switch a time signature for a minute to give myself another beat and a measure, I can do that. And that's kind of what I'm doing right here, because you'll see, if you didn't pay attention to this, let me hide the signature for a second. If you didn't pay attention to the signature so much, all you would hear is a pause. See? And I come right back in on 4. So all I did was extend the time to 5/4 time in here to allot for that extra beat. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1. And I'm right back on time again. And if you wanted to, you could score that way, but truthfully what you do is you just stick a fermata on there, because it lets the musicians think when they see that thing, they take a breath, they relax their shoulders for a minute. They, when they're waiting to the conductor to kind of like look across at them and say, okay, and here we go. And they're all going to come back in again. You know what I mean? I mean, if this was an orchestration situation, which it will be further on. All right, well, I've got some more beat mapping to do. I'll see if I'm going to do a part 3 to this on the importance of tempo when I have this completely done. And I hope everybody's getting something valuable out of this. And if you are, would you take a second to please let me know what it was that you benefited from this conversation here and these techniques that I'm using? Please subscribe to my YouTube channel. I would really be grateful for that. Okay, everybody have a great day.